This is the Business Blackbook, where billion-dollar empires are built and collapse. 827 million pounds gone. 233 years of history erased. One man, one desk, one hidden account. And the most powerful bank in the world never saw it coming. One man, one desk, one city far from home, and a hidden account numbered 8888 in Chinese culture. 8 is the luckiest number you can find, the number of fortune, the number of prosperity. How deeply, brutally ironic, because that account, that single secret account, swallowed one of the oldest banks in the world, whole, destroyed 233 years of history, wiped out an institution that had survived Napoleon, 2 world wars, and the Great Depression. All of it gone in 14 months. But here is what nobody ever tells you about this story. It was not a complex scheme. There were no offshore shell companies, no elaborate money laundering networks, no army of conspirators in expensive suits whispering in the dark corners of Geneva hotels. It was one man, sitting at a desk, typing numbers into a computer, and the most powerful people in banking let him do it. This is the story of Nick Leeson, the boy from Watford who broke Barings Bank and the system that wanted to be fooled. Let us go back to the beginning, because every collapse starts with a rise, and this rise was extraordinary. Nick Leeson was born in 1967 in Watford, a working-class town just north of London. His father was a plasterer. His mother cleaned houses. There were no connections, no trust funds, no family name with gravitas in the city of London. What Nick had was hunger. He scraped his way into Coates Bank as a clerk at 18, then moved to Morgan Stanley, then landed at Barings in 1989. And at Barings, something clicked, because Barings was not just any bank. Barings was the bank. Founded in 1762, Barings had financed the Louisiana Purchase. They had bankrolled the British government during the Napoleonic Wars, when the United States needed to buy nearly a third of the North American continent from France. They called Barings. When Queen Victoria needed financial counsel, they called Barings. This was not a bank. This was a dynasty. And Nick Leeson, the plasterer's son from Watford, was now walking its corridors. He was good, remarkably good, sharp, fast, confident, charismatic. The kind of trader who made things happen. In 1992, Barings sent him to Singapore to run the futures trading operation on the Singapore International Monetary Exchange, CEMEX as it was known. And in Singapore, Nick Leeson became a god. In his first full year, he generated £10 million in profit for Barings. That was roughly 10% of the entire bank's annual earnings, from one desk, in one city. The suits back in London could not believe it. The bonuses started rolling in. The praise poured down. Nick Leeson was called a prodigy, a genius, the golden boy of Barings. But here is the first thing the Black Book wants you to notice. Nobody asked how. On page 1 of the ledger, we find the first entry. And it is not fraud. Not yet. It is something far more human. A mistake. In 1992, a junior trader on Leeson's team made an error. A simple, costly error in executing an order. The loss was relatively small, around £20,000. But in the world of high finance, Even small losses demand explanations, paperwork, accountability. Nick Leeson did not want to explain it. He did not want the scrutiny. He did not want a black mark on the record of his beautiful, perfect team. So he did what any cornered person does in a moment of panic. He hid it. He opened an error account number 88888, and he buried that loss inside it. Just temporarily, he told himself, just until he could trade his way back and cover it. Now stop right there, because this is the moment. This is the exact moment every financial crime in history begins. Not with malice, not with a master plan, with a small lie, a temporary fix, a problem quietly moved to a drawer that nobody is allowed to open. And here is the terrifying part. It worked. Nobody looked. Nobody asked. The loss sat there, quiet and patient, like a debt waiting to be collected. And Nick went back to trading. Here is where the story becomes something else entirely. Something darker and more sophisticated than a simple cover-up. Because Nick Leeson was not just hiding losses, he was also responsible for eluting his own trades. Read that again. In most financial institutions, the person who executes trades on the floor is separated from the person who settles and accounts for those trades in the back office. It is called segregation of duties. It is banking 101. It is the most fundamental internal control in the entire industry. At Barings, Singapore, Nick Leeson ran both sides of the operation. He was the trader, and he was his own bookkeeper. This is the equivalent of letting a student write their own exam and grade it. The question you are asking right now is the right one. How? How did this happen at one of the most prestigious banks on earth? The answer is laziness, arrogance, and the intoxicating blindness that comes from watching profit numbers go up. Senior management at Barings in London genuinely did not fully understand what their Singapore operation was doing. Derivatives, trading, futures contracts, complex financial instruments that required real expertise to monitor. And rather than admit they did not understand it, they simply trusted the numbers. The numbers were good. Why ask questions about good numbers? Let us talk about the machine Nick was operating inside of. Because this is where the story goes from personal tragedy to systemic catastrophe. He was trading futures contracts on the Nikkei 225, the Japanese stock market index. The strategy was supposed to be low risk. Buy contracts on one exchange, sell them on another, pocket the tiny difference in price. Arbitrage, clean, safe, boring. But account 88888 was growing. The small loss from 1992 had not stayed small. Because every time Leeson tried to trade his way back to zero, the market moved against him. So he traded more. Bigger positions, higher stakes, more risk. To cover a loss of 20,000, he took positions that could lose 1 million. To cover 1 million, he took positions that could lose 50 million. This is called the martingale trap, the gambler's fallacy in its purest form, the belief that if you just keep going, if you just increase the bet one more time, the market will eventually come back to you. It never does. By the end of 1994, account 88888 contained losses of £208 million. 208 million. And back in London, the board of Barings was preparing to pay Nick Leeson a bonus of around £450,000 for an exceptional year. But here's what nobody tells you. Here is the detail that changes everything. Nick Leeson was not a rogue genius operating in the shadows. He was operating in plain sight. Internal auditors visited Singapore. They wrote reports. One report from late 1994 specifically noted that Nick's dual role created, and I want you to hear this carefully, an excessive concentration of power in one individual. The report recommended immediate action. The recommendation was filed. 1995, January. The stage is set for the final act, and fate, with its perfect cruelty, decided to provide a trigger. On January the 17th, 1995, a magnitude 6.9 earthquake struck Kobe, Japan, one of Japan's most important industrial cities. 6,000 people died. The physical and psychological damage to Japan's economy was immediate and severe. The Nikkei index began to fall. For Nick Leeson, who was now holding enormous long positions, betting that the Nikkei would rise, this was a catastrophe. Every single point the index dropped was a loss that dwarfed everything that had come before. But instead of closing his positions, instead of admitting the loss and walking away, Nick Leeson doubled down. On page 47 of the ledger, we find the entry that defies all logic and explanation. In the weeks following the Kobe earthquake, as the Nikkei continued its descent, Leeson took on even larger positions. He was buying futures contracts at a rate that accounted for nearly half of all open interest on the CIMEX exchange. He was not hiding anymore. He was fighting the entire Japanese stock market alone with borrowed money. By February of 1995, he held positions worth approximately $27 billion. 27 billion Barings Banks. Total capital at the time was approximately £860 million. He had bet more than 30 times the bank's entire worth. And still, London did not fully grasp what was happening. Barings was actually sending Leeson more money to meet his margin calls. The cash demands that come when your trading positions move against you, and the exchange demands more collateral. In the final weeks, Barings wired hundreds of millions of pounds to Singapore. They thought they were funding a successful arbitrage operation. They were shoveling cash into a furnace. February the 23rd, 1995. Nick Leeson did not come to work. He left a note on his desk. 2 words. I'm sorry. Then he and his wife Lisa disappeared. They flew to Kuala Lumpur, then to Brunei, then to Frankfurt. A desperate, chaotic flight across the world with no real plan and no real destination. Because where do you go when you have broken a 233-year-old institution? The morning after he vanished, the full scale of the damage began to emerge. Investigators began unraveling account 88888. The losses were no longer 200 million, not 500 million, 827 million pounds. Barings Bank's total capital, 860 million pounds. The bank was insolvent overnight, completely and utterly broken. The Bank of England worked through the weekend trying to organize a rescue. Phone calls were made. Emergency meetings were convened. But when the full picture emerged, when the true depth of the losses was finally understood, no bank would touch it. On Sunday, February the 26th, 1995, Barings Bank was declared insolvent. The oldest merchant bank in Britain, the bank of kings and emperors, the bank that had funded nations, sold to a Dutch financial group called Ing for a grand total of £1. £1. Nick Leeson was arrested in Frankfurt, extradited to Singapore. He stood trial, pled guilty to 2 counts of deceiving the bank's auditors and cheating the Singapore exchange. He was sentenced to 6.5 years in Changi Prison, one of the toughest prisons in Southeast Asia. While in prison, he was diagnosed with colon cancer. He survived, served 4 years, was released in 1999. Here is where the story demands you pause and think, because the easy version of this story is simple. Rogue, traitor, bad, apple, criminal. The end. But the Black Book does not deal in easy versions. The real story is about a system that wanted to believe, because the profit numbers were beautiful, because asking hard questions about beautiful numbers is uncomfortable, because the people responsible for oversight did not understand the instruments they were supposed to oversee, because ambition and greed dressed themselves up as trust and delegated authority. Nick Leeson did not break Barings Bank with sophistication. He broke it with mediocrity, and the bank handed him the tools to do it. After Barings, the entire global banking industry rewrote its internal controls. Segregation of duties became sacred law. Risk management departments gained real power. Independent oversight of trading operations became mandatory. The industry looked at what one man with access to his own bookkeeping could do, and it was terrified. But here is the uncomfortable truth that the Black Book leaves you with. The same warning signs, the same red flags, the same patterns appear again and again in the decades that followed. Jerome Kerviel at Societe Generale in 2008, 4.9 billion euros. The London Whale at JP Morgan Chase in 2012, $6 billion. Different names, different banks, different decades, same account, different numbers. Because the real vulnerability in every financial institution is not a sophisticated criminal. It is not a mastermind with a plan. It is a system that rewards performance without understanding it, that trusts numbers it cannot explain, that promotes people it cannot evaluate, that mistakes confidence for competence, and that files away reports about excessive concentrations of power. Nick Leeson is 67 years old now. He became a public speaker, wrote a memoir, gave interviews, became, in a deeply strange way, a cautionary icon. He talks about the pressure, the isolation, the first small lie that grew into the largest lie in banking history. And every time you hear him speak, the most chilling thing is not the scale of the destruction. It is how ordinary it all began. £20,000. A drawer, a number, 8, 8, 8, 8. 8. The luckiest number in Chinese culture. The number of a hidden account that devoured a dynasty. And with that, the Black Book closes. Subscribe, and we will open the next page soon.